My name is Dennis Martinez. Back in 2023, I was a 20-year-old freshman who had just graduated from high school. I had always dreamed of studying in California, and after years of working hard, I finally received the news that changed my life. I had been accepted into the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. It felt like the beginning of everything I had ever wanted, and moved across the country to start a new chapter. Everything about Los Angeles felt exciting and unfamiliar, and I couldn't wait to experience college life. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment just a few minutes from the UCLA campus. It wasn't anything fancy, just old beige walls, worn wooden floors, a tiny kitchen, and a small balcony, but it was affordable, quiet, and close enough that I could walk to class every morning. To me, it was perfect. It was my first place, my first taste of independence, and I couldn't have been happier. The first 10 days were honestly some of the happiest days of my life. Every morning, I woke up around 7 a.m., brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the balcony to enjoy the cool California air. The neighborhood always felt alive. Students walked down the sidewalks chatting about classes. Cyclists rode past on their way to campus, and the streets were filled with the peaceful sounds of a new day. After my lectures, I'd spend a few hours studying at the university library, grab dinner from a nearby cafe, and head back to my apartment just before sunset. Life had settled into a calm, comfortable routine, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt exactly the way it was supposed to. Nothing seemed unusual until around the 10th day. That evening, after classes, I grabbed dinner at a small burger place a few blocks from campus before heading back to my apartment. By the time I got home, it was a little after 9 p.m. I locked the front door behind me, just like I always did. I even checked it twice. Living alone in a new city had made me extra careful. I took a quick shower, changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants, and sat on my bed with my laptop to work on a college project that was due the following week. The apartment was completely silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the occasional cars passing outside. I had been working for about 20 minutes when something caught my eye. A movement out of the corner of my vision. Someone was standing on my balcony. My heart nearly stopped. I froze. There was no way anyone could be there. I had locked the apartment door only minutes earlier, and my unit was on the 3rd floor. There wasn't a fire escape outside my balcony, and the neighboring balconies were separated by solid concrete walls. Slowly, I turned my head. It was a young woman. She had long, curly black hair that hung over her face, hiding every feature. She was wearing faded blue jeans and a plain white t-shirt. She wasn't moving. She just stood there, facing me. I couldn't see her eyes. I couldn't even tell if she was breathing. For several seconds, neither of us moved. I was too terrified to speak. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe she had climbed onto the wrong balcony. Maybe she needed help. Maybe this was some kind of prank. Trying not to make a sound, I slowly slid off the bed and took one cautious step toward the balcony door. The floor creaked beneath my foot. The woman reacted instantly. Without turning around, she suddenly leaped over the balcony railing. My stomach dropped. "No!" I shouted as I sprinted toward the balcony. I grabbed the sliding door, threw it open, and rushed outside, expecting to see someone badly injured on the pavement below. But when I looked down, there was nothing. No woman, no body, no sound of someone running away. Just an empty parking lot lit by a few dim streetlights. I leaned farther over the railing, scanning every corner below. Nothing. There was nowhere she could have gone in those few seconds. I stood there in complete disbelief, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I had been exhausted from classes. Maybe my eyes had played tricks on me. That's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, it didn't feel like my imagination. Everything had felt too real. The way the girl stood perfectly still, the way she jumped from the balcony without making a sound, and the overwhelming fear that rushed through my body the moment I saw her. I locked the balcony door, pulled the curtains shut, and checked the front door one more time to make sure it was locked. Then I climbed into bed. Sleep never came easily. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the entire incident over and over in my mind. Every little noise made me glance toward the balcony. The ticking of the wall clock suddenly sounded louder than ever, and every passing car outside made my heart race. Hours seemed to pass. Eventually, my eyes grew heavy. Without realizing it, I finally drifted off to sleep. I jolted awake. For a split second, I had no idea where I was. Then I realized it was just my phone alarm. Sunlight streamed through the edges of the curtains, making the apartment feel normal again. The fear from the previous night almost seemed ridiculous in the bright morning light. I let out a deep breath. Maybe it really was just my imagination, I whispered to myself. I got out of bed, took a shower, brushed my teeth, and got dressed for college. Before leaving, I glanced at the balcony one last time. Everything looked completely normal. The curtains swayed gently in the morning breeze, and there was no sign that anyone had ever been there. Trying to put the strange experience behind me, I grabbed my backpack, locked the apartment, and headed toward UCLA, hoping the busy day ahead would help me forget what I'd seen the night before. I had no idea. That was only the beginning. The rest of the day went by like any other. I attended my lectures, worked on a group assignment, and spent some time with my friends outside the campus. We grabbed coffee, joked around, and for a while I completely forgot about what had happened the previous night. By the time I headed back to my apartment, the sun had already set. As I walked into the apartment complex, I looked up toward my building. That's when my heart skipped a beat. Someone was standing on my balcony, completely motionless. Even from the parking lot, I recognized the silhouette. Long, curly hair, the same white t-shirt, the same figure I'd seen the night before. I didn't waste a second. I sprinted through the front entrance and jumped into the elevator. I pressed the button for the 5th floor where my apartment was. The elevator doors closed. It began to rise. Then, ding, the elevator stopped unexpectedly on the 3rd floor. The doors slowly slid open. I frowned. No one pressed this button. I muttered. I assumed it was just a technical glitch. Stepping out into the hallway, I decided to take the stairs for the remaining 2 floors. The moment I entered the 3rd floor corridor, something felt wrong. The hallway was unnaturally quiet. Then the ceiling lights began to flicker. On, off, on, off. Each blink plunged the hallway into darkness for a split second. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed someone standing at the far end of the corridor. My blood ran cold. It was the same girl. Her long, curly hair covered her face, making it impossible to see her eyes. She stood perfectly still in front of room 69, dragging her fingernails slowly across the wooden door. The sound echoed through the empty hallway. Every scrape made my skin crawl. I couldn't move. I just watched her. Then, she stopped scratching. Slowly, she turned her head toward me. Even though her face was hidden behind her hair, I knew she was looking directly at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without making a sound, she stepped forward and passed straight through the apartment door. Not around it, not opening it. She simply disappeared into it. I stood frozen. After several seconds, I forced myself to walk toward room 69. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I finally reached the door, I stared at it in disbelief. The room door was completely shut. A thick metal padlock hung on the outside latch. Dust covered the handle, as if no one had entered that apartment for months. There was no way anyone could have gone inside. I reached out and touched the cold doorknob. Locked. I stepped back, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. If the room had been locked from the outside, then what exactly had I just watched walk through that door? I couldn't stop thinking about room 69. Instead of going straight to my room, I walked downstairs to the building's security office. The small room was lit by a single desk lamp. Sitting behind the desk was the apartment's security guard, a man who looked to be around 40 years old. He was quietly watching the security monitors while sipping a cup of coffee. I knocked on the open door. "Excuse me," I said. Can I ask you something? The guard looked up. Sure, he replied. I was just on the third floor. Who lives in room 69? The guard's expression immediately changed. He slowly leaned back in his chair and stayed silent for a few seconds before answering. Room 69, he said quietly. A man named Jacob used to live there. Used to? I asked. The guard nodded. About 3 months ago, Jacob disappeared. What do you mean, disappeared? He walked out of his apartment one night and never came back. The police searched the building, checked the security cameras, questioned the tenants, everything. But they never found him. No body, no evidence. He simply vanished. A cold feeling spread through my body. I hesitated before asking another question. Have you ever seen a girl with long, curly hair? She wears blue jeans and a white t-shirt. The guard froze. The color slowly drained from his face. For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then he forced a small smile and slowly shook his head. No, he replied. I've never seen anyone like that. Something about his answer didn't feel right. His voice had become shaky. He avoided making eye contact. It felt like he knew exactly what I was talking about, but he was too afraid to admit it. I thanked him and returned to my room. The next morning, after thinking about everything that had happened, I tried to convince myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe someone was playing a prank on the new student. Maybe I was simply exhausted from college. I decided I needed proof. That afternoon, I bought a small motion-activated security camera and mounted it above my balcony door so it could record the entire balcony throughout the night. If someone came back, this time the camera would catch them. That night, I was determined to find out the truth. After dinner, I checked the motion-activated camera one last time to make sure it was recording. The small green light blinked, letting me know it was working. It was 9 p.m. I sat on my bed, staring through the glass balcony door. Nothing. The balcony remained completely empty. The minutes passed slowly. By 11 p.m., I was still awake. I hadn't seen a single person. No one's coming tonight, I said to myself. Feeling a little relieved, I switched off the lights, locked the balcony door one more time, and climbed into bed. I must have fallen asleep almost immediately. The sound pulled me out of a deep sleep. My heart was already racing before I even opened my eyes. I reached for my phone. I knew what a.m. Someone was knocking on my door. It wasn't loud. It was slow, almost deliberate. Thinking it might be a neighbor needing help, I got out of bed and carefully walked toward the front door. Who's there? I asked. No answer. The knocking stopped. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Confused, I slowly unlocked the door and pulled it open. No one. I stepped into the hallway and looked both ways. Completely empty. As I turned back toward my room, whack! A crushing blow exploded across the back of my head. Pain shot through my skull. My vision blurred instantly. I stumbled forward and collapsed onto the floor inside my room. Just before everything went black, I caught a brief glimpse of a man standing over me. He was dressed entirely in black and was holding a heavy iron rod in his hand. Then, darkness. I don't know how much time had passed. Minutes, maybe hours. A sharp pain throbbed through my head. I slowly opened my eyes. Everything around me was blurry. As my vision came into focus, panic hit me. My wrists were tightly bound behind my back with thick rope. My ankles were tied together. I was lying on the cold wooden floor of my own room, unable to move. The room was silent. Then, I heard slow footsteps coming from somewhere inside the room. The footsteps grew louder. I struggled against the ropes, but they were tied too tightly. Then a figure stepped into the light. It was the security guard, the same man I had spoken to just a day earlier. He was no longer wearing his security uniform. Instead, he was dressed in dark clothes, and the iron rod was still in his hand. He looked down at me and smiled. So, he said calmly, "How do you know about her?" I swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" "The girl," he replied. "The one with the curly hair." My heart started pounding. I stared at him in disbelief. "How do you know about her?" I asked. His smile slowly faded. He pulled up a chair and sat in front of me. I loved her, he said quietly. Her name was Emily. He looked toward the balcony for a few seconds before continuing. But she never loved me. She loved Jacob. The name instantly caught my attention. The man from apartment 69? I whispered. He nodded. They planned to leave Los Angeles together. She wanted nothing to do with me. His voice became colder. One night, I followed Jacob into the apartment parking area. We argued, and I lost control. He lowered his head. I killed him. I felt my stomach twist. I buried his body behind the apartment building, where no one would ever think to look. He let out a slow breath. I thought everything was over. But somehow, Emily found out the truth. His eyes narrowed. She said she was going to the police. I begged her to stay quiet. I brought her into this apartment so we could talk. He slowly pointed toward the balcony. She refused to listen. His voice dropped to a whisper. So, I pushed her from the balcony. The room fell silent. A chill ran through my entire body. The girl I'd been seeing every night. She hadn't been trying to scare me. She had been trying to warn me. The security guard slowly stood up and picked up the iron rod. His expression was completely emotionless. He took one step toward me, then another. You've seen too much, he said. His grip tightened around the rod. I'm not making the same mistake twice. He stared directly into my eyes. Now, it's your turn to disappear. I was frozen with fear. I knew one thing. If I didn't find a way to escape in the next few seconds, I wasn't leaving that room alive. Just as the security guard raised the iron rod above his head, a cold gust of wind rushed through the apartment. The balcony door slowly slid open by itself. Creak! The room suddenly fell silent. The guard froze. His confident expression vanished. Slowly, he turned toward the balcony. Standing there was the girl. The same girl with the long, curly hair. She was wearing the same faded blue jeans and white t-shirt. For the first time, she wasn't moving. The guard's face turned completely pale. No, he whispered. That's impossible. He took a step backward. You're dead. The girl remained perfectly still. Without saying a single word, she slowly lifted her head. The guard couldn't believe his eyes. Determined to find out whether she was real or just an illusion, he slowly stepped onto the balcony. That was the biggest mistake of his life. The balcony was where she had died. As soon as he stepped onto it, he lost his footing. He slipped on the wet concrete near the railing. For one horrifying second, he desperately reached for the railing, but missed. He fell backward over the edge. His scream echoed through the apartment complex before ending with a sickening thud below. Everything became silent. I slowly looked back toward the balcony. The girl was still standing there. This time, the wind gently brushed her curly hair away from her face. For the first time, I finally saw her clearly. She was incredibly beautiful, with kind eyes and a peaceful smile. There was no anger in her expression, only sadness, as if she had finally found justice after all this time. She looked at me for a few quiet seconds. Then she gave me a faint, gentle smile. The night breeze swept across the balcony, and in the blink of an eye, she faded into the darkness and disappeared forever. A few minutes later, I heard police sirens outside the apartment. The neighbors had called 911 after hearing the guard scream. The officers untied me and immediately began searching the room. I told them everything that had happened, from seeing the mysterious girl for the first time to hearing the security guard confess to murdering Jacob and Emily. At first, the officers were skeptical. Then I remembered the motion-activated security camera I had installed above my balcony. We removed the memory card and watched the footage together. The camera had recorded the security guard entering my apartment after knocking on the door. It also captured him dragging me across the floor after knocking me unconscious. Most importantly, the recording clearly captured his confession to murdering Jacob and Emily. The following day, investigators searched the area behind the apartment building. Buried beneath the soil, they found human remains that were later identified as Jacob. Emily's death which had been ruled an accident months earlier, was officially reopened as a homicide investigation. The case was finally solved. I moved out of that apartment the very next day and never returned. Even now, whenever someone asks me why I left Los Angeles so suddenly, I simply tell them that some places never let go of the people who died there. And sometimes, the dead don't haunt us for revenge. Sometimes, they're simply waiting for someone to uncover the truth.